Have you ever been playing a game where a character says something so bizarre that it completely takes you out of the experience?
Jason!
Maybe it was hilariously bad, or maybe it was a total drag. Well, today we're diving into the awkward, the clunky, and the just plain awful.
Feel any better now that you hit me?
Sam from Gamers Review Games here, and this is 10 video games with hilariously bad dialogue. Let's get into it. Kicking off our list is Forspoken, a game that's been widely criticized for its narrative and dialogue, and for good reason. While the main story has some interesting ideas, it's the constant unnecessary banter that makes the experience so painful. A lot of the game involves listening to the protagonist Frey talk to herself or argue with her magical sentient bracelet Cuff.
Yeah, okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, talk to sentient cuffs, kill jacked up beasts. You know what? I'll probably fly next.
Now you're just being ridiculous.
Oh, that's too far. Good to know there's a line.
These conversations were clearly meant to be clever, self-aware jokes with on-the-nose gaming references, but they often come across as awkward and cringy. The game leans heavily into the "I'm not from this world" trope, with Frey's modern slang constantly confusing the game's non-playable characters.
I do not know how I got here. I am exhausted. I am starving, and all I want is to go home.
Her vestments are strange. Where is she from?
Hell's Kitchen.
You see? She is Hell's Spawn.
Like, how many times do we need to see an NPC go,
What?
to drive the point home? We get it. You're a Twitter user from 2020 that's in a mystical fantasy world. This really could have worked, but being reminded every 5 minutes that Frey is a stranger in the land does become quite annoying over time. Despite the clunky dialogue, the gameplay itself is pretty fun. The parkour in particular is pretty slick, and the combat can be somewhat entertaining, at least for a little while, even if it is a little one note. However, the lack of narrative intrigue and the sheer amount of bad writing you have to wade through just make it not worthwhile for many players. You can't have a list about bad video game dialogue without mentioning the king of so bad it's good, that is Resident Evil. Let's travel back to 1996. Games are being revolutionized by 3D environments and a movement toward fully voiced characters.
Rebecca, you're safe.
I saw you in the garden. I've caught up with you at last.
You serious?
Enter Resident Evil. Resident Evil was a survival horror game that helped define a whole genre. That is, if you could get past the, shall we say, unique dialogue.
Chris? Stop it. Wesker, you're pitiful.
These moments will have you screaming. No, not from the zombies, but from laughter. The whole thing is a love letter to those wonderfully cheesy 80s B horror movies. It's campy, it's ridiculous, and it totally throws you off when you're supposed to be terrified. The number of ridiculously memorable lines is insane. You'll be evading a flesh-eating zombie only for Barry Burton to pop out with the line,
"That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich."
It's not just the big moments either. Even simple things, picking up a new key or finding a door, will have characters spouting some hilariously unnecessary line.
Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Okay.
Subsequent games even tried to keep the tradition alive, though usually just with some snarky one-liners from the likes of Leon.
Since you're here, why don't I introduce you to it? It should keep you busy.
Can't remember the name, huh? A senior moment, perhaps.
But the OG is the one that really got it right. The tone of the dialogue is so flat and the delivery is so one note that it's truly a thing of beauty. It's bad, it's hilarious, and it's perfect. It's a glorious B-movie masterpiece that's so terrible it actually makes the game better. Next on our list is The Lord of the Rings Gollum. This game proves that even a beloved franchise can get a terrible adaptation. You could say the developers were going for a less is more approach. You know, less time developing a good story and game mechanics, and more time expecting fans to flash the cash because, you know, it's another Lord of the Rings game. I mean, what were they even going for here? Not only is this a terribly built stealth experience, but by attaching it to such a revered series, it just ends up leaving a very sour taste.
Wow, this tastes awful.
Did anyone really ask for a game where you play as Gollum? It's the kind of thing you'd expect a mischievous AI to generate after being left alone with the Tolkien archives for 5 minutes. And the dialogue? Oh, the dialogue. The game could not string 2 sentences together without sounding like it was a poor man's imitation of Tolkien's masterpiece.
But it appears they won't even let you into the execution chamber, which makes me wonder why.
Smeagol's not a squealer.
I don't like where this is going.
Was there really not a point where someone looked at this project and asked, is this really a good idea? Or did they just figure, it's a living? The game tried to remedy its many issues with its own morality system. Watching Gollum and Smeagol argue amongst themselves, trying to determine the best course of action, which in theory could have been a very interesting mechanic. But instead, we got a cheap paper, scissors, rock, with the end result having no bearing on the story. Gollum's voice may have been passable enough to make these moments of dialogue, or should I say monologue, sort of work.
The beetle saw us. Smash it, smash it. What if it's friendly? Eat it. Don't let it tell on us.
But the rest of the characters were a hatchet piece at best. Gandalf was a complete mess. Instead of being the wise wizard that has traveled across Middle-earth for centuries, he is instead an old hermit with back problems.
I have not traveled these many miles to listen to your lies.
My back! Oh, my back! Lord of the Rings Gollum is littered with so many issues that the cringeworthy dialogue only scratches the surface. This might be a stretch for an entry, but WWE 2K25, or almost any 2K sports game, is known for their horrendous dialogue choices. For a game series built on drama and larger-than-life characters, the WWE 2K franchise, particularly in its My Rise story mode, delivers some of the most lifeless and cringeworthy dialogue in modern gaming. While the core grappling and high-flying action are often on point, the narrative experience is repeatedly undercut by a script that feels both completely generic and bizarrely out of place. The worst offender is arguably the player character themselves.
Give me the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock.
Boring! No matter how you customize your created wrestler, their size, background, or in-ring persona, they are forced to speak with one of two generic voices.
Oh, I was mainly here to work on some choreography with Akam and Rizar.
That is, one for men and one for women. The result is a total disconnect between the character you've built and the words coming out of their mouth.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
It's a surreal experience watching a hulking monster of a man sound like a timid accountant or a rebellious punk rock wrestler speak with the cadence of a corporate spokesperson. Adding to the problem is a supporting cast of wrestlers who deliver their lines with a baffling mix of flatness and over-the-top hammy performances.
I know Triple H and everyone is telling you this is over now, but I still think there's more to come.
It's as if the wrestlers were given no direction at all. The dialogue isn't just bad, it's so consistently awkward, it pulls you out of the story entirely.
Members of the board, do we have your attention?
In the end, you're left with a bizarre contradiction. The gameplay and visual spectacle of 2K25 can be genuinely fun and engaging, but the moment a character opens their mouth, the illusion of being a top-tier superstar gets smacked with a steel chair. It's an embarrassing spectacle that makes even Roman Reigns' early promo work look like Shakespeare in comparison.
You are a sniveling little suck-up sellout full of suffering succotash, son!
Now, we know that movie tie-in games can be very hit and miss, but what happens when you try to roll a whole franchise into one game? 007 Legends, that's what happens. 007 Legends has been criticized for many things, like turning the universe into a simple Call of Duty clone, or implementing non-existent stealth mechanics,
Drop an airplane on my foot.
because, you know, good stealth mechanics in a spy game would have just been so inconvenient. Not least of these criticisms was for inserting Daniel Craig's iteration of the British spy into each film. I get that it is cheaper to keep the same voice and character model for the entirety of the experience, but it would have been much more intriguing and entertaining to bring back Sean Connery's
A martini, shaken not stirred.
or Pierce Brosnan's
Beg your pardon? Forgot to knock.
At least we would have had the charm from those eras return, rather than rehashing them with the, at the time, modern 007. Looking beyond all that, there are two key features that made playing as the infamous MI6 agent a complete slog. These are the picked out plot that drops context and leads to confusing sections of Bond's history, and the flat vocal performance that lacks the charm and charisma that James Bond is supposed to possess.
You go off to Zao. I'll follow Graves.
Try to stay out of trouble.
You too.
The awkward exchanges with the villains alone show how rough the story writing process was for this game.
Oh, congratulations, Mr. Bond. You've managed to delay my plans, but you haven't stopped them.
It seems to me you can't pull this off without us.
Is that so?
Quickly shoving in brief altered historical Bond moments in amongst bland levels and expecting the audience to simply go, "Oh yeah, I remember that part," with a smile was definitely the devs overreaching. It's not a so bad it's good situation either. The dialogue is just boring. Boring. There isn't much that goes on from start to finish, with all dialogue basically just being simple directives on the next bit of the mission or a poor reprisal of the aforementioned key moments in the Bond series. Next up on our list is Wanted Dead, a game that feels like it time traveled straight from the early 2000s and just got a fresh coat of paint. It's a brand new IP from Colonial Studios, but with the developers from the Ninja Gaiden series at the helm, and the influence is super obvious. You've got the brutal, skill-based combat and a linear level design that's, well, a little on the nose, but hey, it's still a blast to play. Now, let's talk about the story. Much like its Ninja Gaiden ancestors, the writing is an absolute riot. The plot about Lieutenant Stone and her elite Hong Kong police squad is fine on its own, but the dialogue, it had me in stitches constantly.
All right, knock it off.
You seem to be very hostile today, Hannah.
Shut the hell up, all of you!
The awkward phrasing and random comments that make zero sense are pure comedy gold.
Eat the pork.
No. Just touch it.
That's what she said!
The voice actors seem to know it too, delivering performances that are all over the place. Lieutenant Stone herself can go from sounding like she's reading a grocery list to trying to squeeze out every drop of emotion in a single sentence.
I'll take Cortez. He wants ramen, and I want some answers. Every lead we have says there's a new player in town. Instead of getting Dour's assassin in our office, we end up picking their trash.
It's a performance that's honestly so bad, it's unbelievably good. The reason we picked Wanted Dead over the Ninja Gaiden series for this list was because, at least with Ninja Gaiden, the B-movie plot and performances were much more intentional and always played second fiddle to the gameplay. But here, it was supposed to be a serious narrative, and somehow that made it that much funnier. Next on our list, a game I completely forgot about until I was halfway through writing this script. What do you get when a developer takes a beloved tabletop RPG, strips it of its rich lore, and throws it in a blender with some early PS3 era presentation? You get Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood.
What the hell is even that?
This was a major letdown, especially given the incredible source material. Instead of complex characters, we're stuck with one-dimensional plot devices whose only purpose is to push the narrative forward. And the dialogue, oh boy is it inconsistent.
To what do I owe the honor of your visit? I know this prison has a lab where certain prisoners can undergo treatment. I need to get in there, and I'm told you can help me. And perhaps I can help you.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
One moment, Cahal's daughter is struggling to relate to him, and their relationship is strained. The next, it's like she's about to give him a Father of the Year award. It also doesn't help that characters constantly over-explain what you need to do.
They've still got no idea she's on site, but their guard patrols have changed, and certain areas are locked down. And that includes the one Ludmilla's in. But to get her off site, the locked-off areas need to be manually unlocked. And Ludmilla's stuck on the wrong side.
So, they've locked down the facility and Ludmilla is in the lockdown facility, so she's locked down? Thank you so much for the explanation. Seriously, this game is littered with this awkward over-explaining dialogue, and it's honestly more annoying than a boss fight with no checkpoints. Unfortunately, the problems don't stop there. If bad dialogue and a weak story weren't enough, the gameplay loop is just as bad. The game's characters will lecture you about how being covert is vital to a mission's success, but the stealth mechanics make hiding in tall grass in other games look like a stroke of genius.
Are you sure about that?
It's literally just crouching and moving around corners slowly while trying not to get seen. So naturally, you'll just say, screw it. You'll switch to werewolf mode and tear through the enemies. And despite how cool that sounds, it's honestly just as boring. Prototype, a game from 2009, did this so much better. I really don't know what the developers were trying to achieve with this game, other than maybe to create the ultimate cure for insomnia. Up next, Dustborn is a prime example of how not to do self-aware comedy.
I'm fat and I'm physical, okay? I'm strong, and I can kick. Oh!
The game tries so hard to be topical, with a script based on woke culture and even its power-ups and mechanics being named after awkward trends.
We can do the same thing in combat and trick our enemies into turning on each other. Trust no one.
It's an attempt at comedy that requires finesse, which Dustborn significantly lacks. Undertale, for example, is like a friend who slides into a conversation, makes a quick pun, gives a quick wink, and everyone gets a chuckle and moves on. Dustborn, on the other hand, is like a friend that cracks a really bad joke and then starts a PowerPoint presentation on why the joke was actually quite funny and you just don't get it.
Barely a scratch. I've seen a lot worse.
You just don't get it, do you?
Instead of a slight nod to its own self-awareness, Dustborn smashes through the comedy glass in a way that is so over the top and cringy, it leads to countless eye rolls. Beyond this, Dustborn is, well, a really problematic game. There are multiple criticisms aimed at it for its heavy-handed message or its awful intro sequence. Its title theme song is an absolute mess, but the story seems to be constantly at war with itself. Characters often use in-universe terms that feel stilted and unnatural, and the reliance on over-explaining lore shows that there was a lack of confidence in the audience in understanding the game's story. The dialogue at times is downright childish, with characters arguing with each other in ways that I haven't done since I was 5 years old.
I think so. I mean, we're not boys. We're professionals. We're always ready.
Big words from a small boy.
Even the game's original message seems to get muddied as the characters that are supposed to be the good guys are constantly shown bullying people who oppose them and even resorting to gaslighting tactics, an idea they were supposed to be against. The irony is the characters represent everything they hate in the world. Way to ruin your own ideology.
Good job!
Dustborn just feels like a game that was created as a political message and then shoehorned into a video game without much thought. Let us know in the comments if you suffered through this one. Mass Effect Andromeda is up next on our list, and it really is unsurprising. Off the back of a trilogy that, whilst it may have had some problems, Mass Effect 3 was highly regarded by most, Andromeda was supposed to make the series a whole lot bigger, with more emphasis on open world exploration and expansive side quests. Instead, we got a game that's on a list about bad dialogue.
Nicely done.
It was a complete train wreck, with a 5-year development cycle where most of the work was crammed into the final 18 months. It's like when you tell your boss you're working on that report, but the only thing you've accomplished for weeks is getting a new high score in Candy Crush. Then you suddenly realize the deadline is today, slam a 4-pack of Monster, and furiously type out a report that's 90% bullet points and sheer panic. Imagine that, but in game form. The exploration felt like a chore, the character models looked like they just had a Botox party, and the whole thing was riddled with more bugs than a Bethesda game. But let's get to the good stuff. The dialogue. The conversations felt so generic and impersonal, you'd think you were talking to a customer service bot. And don't even get me started on the name Pathfinder. They used it so often, it started to lose all meaning.
Part of the job, Pathfinder. You know Pathfinder. Pathfinder. Stay out of Kadara's business.
I no longer need you, Pathfinder.
Every time some random NPC shows up and starts rambling about Pathfinder this and Pathfinder that, it pulls you right out of the story. Not that you were ever fully in it to begin with. I get that the Pathfinders are key to the story, but it would be like Uncharted's Nathan Drake being referred to exclusively as Treasure Hunter. The dialogue might not be Andromeda's biggest flaw, but it's definitely the cherry on top of this unpolished, slightly chaotic sundae. When you mix the clunky conversations with a bland story and a tedious open world, you get a game that's guaranteed to make you shake your head and sigh, and maybe even laugh a little. Before we get into number 1, here are a few dishonourable mentions.
They might call themselves children of the vault, but they're still bandits, and bandits are incredibly stupid.
Okay, we're going to surrender. Please don't kill us, Crapeye.
I may not know what Eggman's up to, but it can't be a good thing.
Okay, with your help, this should be a piece of cake.
I'll do my best.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light.
Then, if I am to join you, I must die.
It is prophecy. We cannot fail, for we are many.
For we are many.
Amen to that.
For our final entry on this list, when a game is a sequel to a beloved film franchise, you expect a certain level of quality, especially when it comes to the story and dialogue. After all, the Alien universe is known for its intense atmosphere and memorable characters like Ripley, Hudson, and Bishop. Unfortunately, Alien's Colonial Marines missed that memo. This game is a masterclass in how to make a sci-fi horror game feel as thrilling as waiting in line at the DMV.
You're gonna have to go stand in the blue line.
Look, I was already in that line.
Sir, don't get snippy with me.
From the start, the game throws you into a world of generic, uninspired dialogue that sounds like it was generated by an AI that only had access to military movie cliches.
Rise and shine, Marines. This isn't a drill and you aren't in Kansas anymore.
Characters constantly spout lines like, "We're in trouble now," and "I don't know if we'll make it." It's the kind of script where you could swap the characters with a toaster and a bag of chips, and the story wouldn't lose a single bit of its emotional depth. You'll be so bored by the conversations that you'll start wishing that the xenomorphs would just get on with the face hugging already.
Tried to pull rank and leave you for dead.
Look, everyone calm down. I was scared.
On top of the snooze fest of a script, the game's AI is, well, it's something. The xenomorphs, being terrifying creatures from the films, behave like they're waiting for a bus. They'll stand around and let you shoot them, which, while convenient, kind of ruins the whole "we're trapped in a nightmare" vibe. It's like watching a horror movie where the monster stops to ask for directions. You can't help but wonder if the developers knew the dialogue was bad and just made the enemies equally uninspired so at least the game would be consistent. But it's not just the awful dialogue that can get stuck in your head. When your character dies, it can be much more painful. But which deaths are the most memorable? Click the video on screen to find out.